Oh, they thought it's all a bit too much, really. An Oscar, for goodness sake, she's only 4.
Do you really know who Disney's true girl next door was? Or do you only remember the image that Hollywood carefully framed and preserved for decades? In the early 1960s, when family films were meant to feel safe, hopeful, and morally clear, one face came to define that entire era: Hayley Mills. With her wide eyes, gentle voice, and a smile that seemed incapable of deceit, she became the embodiment of innocence at a time when the world desperately wanted to believe in it. Audiences didn't just watch her films, they trusted her. Parents trusted her with their children's hearts, and children trusted her to show them a world where kindness always mattered. But what almost no one understood was that the girl who carried that enormous emotional weight on screen was quietly carrying a very different burden off it. Hayley Catherine Rose Vivian Mills was born on April 18, 1946 in London, into a family where art was not a hobby, but a way of breathing. Her father, Sir John Mills, was already one of Britain's most respected actors, admired for his discipline, restraint, and emotional depth. Her mother, Mary Hayley Bell, was a writer with a sharp intellect and a fierce dedication to storytelling. Creativity was everywhere in the Mills household, but indulgence was not. Hayley was not raised as a pampered child star in waiting. She was raised with expectations, structure, and an unspoken understanding that talent alone was never enough. Effort mattered. Behavior mattered. Reputation mattered. Her childhood unfolded between two contrasting spaces. One was the countryside, where she experienced moments of freedom, imagination, and warmth. The other was boarding school, rigid, emotionally distant, and often lonely. For a sensitive child, the separation from family and the constant demand to conform left deep impressions. Hayley learned very early how to retreat inward, how to observe rather than express, how to survive quietly. She read constantly, escaping into stories that offered emotional movement when real life felt still. Long before fame arrived, Hayley already understood solitude. It was during those years that she encountered her first harsh lesson about the adult world. An inappropriate advance from a trusted authority figure shattered any illusion that adults were automatically safe. She did not speak loudly about it at the time, but the experience settled into her understanding of power, vulnerability, and silence. The public would later celebrate her purity, unaware that it had already been tested and wounded in ways no child should endure. Her entry into cinema was not driven by ambition. At 12, she appeared in a British film almost casually, believing it to be nothing more than an interesting experience alongside her father. Yet the camera recognized something immediately. There was an emotional honesty in her face that could not be trained. When the film crossed the Atlantic and reached Walt Disney, the reaction was instantaneous. He did not analyze box office potential or market trends. He saw a child who felt real. And that authenticity was exactly what Disney believed audiences were craving. When Hayley met Walt Disney, she did not meet a mogul in her mind. She met a gentle, curious man who treated her with calm respect. That distinction mattered. For the first time, she felt seen without being scrutinized. Disney did not speak to her as a product. He spoke to her as a person. That meeting changed everything. Within months, Hayley was under contract, leaving behind the cold corridors of boarding school and stepping into a world that promised opportunity but demanded transformation. Pollyanna arrived like a cultural wave. The film did more than succeed. It reassured. In a world balancing post-war uncertainty and social change, Hayley's performance offered emotional clarity. Kindness was not naive. Optimism was not weakness. Audiences responded with overwhelming affection. Awards followed, letters poured in, and Hayley became a symbol larger than herself. Yet inside, she remained shy, deeply self-conscious, and uncertain of her place in this sudden spotlight. She performed because she was disciplined, not because she craved attention. When Disney cast her in The Parent Trap, the challenge was technical, emotional, and psychological. Playing two roles required precision that would intimidate seasoned adults. Hayley approached it methodically, focusing on the work rather than the weight of expectations. The result was seamless. Audiences forgot they were watching a performance. They believed in the illusion completely. And with that belief, Hayley Mills moved from beloved child star to cultural icon. But icons are rarely allowed to evolve. As Hayley grew older, the gap between who she was becoming and who the world wanted her to remain grew wider. On screen, she was expected to freeze in time. Off screen, she was navigating adolescence, identity, and desire without guidance. The transition from child to woman did not come with instruction. It came with judgment. Her decision to step away from Disney's carefully managed image was courageous and costly. Choosing more mature roles meant risking the affection of audiences who preferred memory over reality. Films like The Family Way marked a turning point. Hayley was no longer protected by innocence. She was vulnerable, human, flawed. Critics responded positively, the public less so. The girl next door was no longer next door. She had moved on. At the same time, her personal life entered turbulent territory. Relationships became complicated by power imbalances and public scrutiny. Falling in love with an older, established filmmaker offered intellectual connection, but also introduced dynamics that would later weigh heavily on her sense of autonomy. Marriage did not provide refuge. It provided another structure she eventually needed to leave. Motherhood changed her profoundly. With children, Hayley experienced both healing and regret. She understood how deeply absence could shape a child, and she wrestled with guilt over time lost to work and survival. Unlike her public persona, her private self was constantly questioning, reassessing, trying to do better than what had been done to her. Financial devastation arrived quietly but brutally. The realization that the fortune she believed awaited her adulthood had been consumed by taxes, mismanagement, and legal failure struck at the core of her trust. She did not feel robbed of money alone. She felt robbed of choice. Independence delayed is independence denied, and she carried that loss silently, choosing dignity over bitterness. Even symbols of achievement were not spared. The disappearance of her juvenile Oscar felt less like theft and more like erasure. A tangible reminder of her childhood success vanished without explanation. It was another moment where her past seemed to slip through her fingers, unreachable no matter how tightly she held on. Health struggles later in life forced a reckoning she could no longer postpone. Cancer stripped away any illusion of control. It reduced life to its most essential elements: presence, love, time. Survival demanded surrender, not strength. And through that process, Hayley found a quieter resilience, one not built on applause or approval, but on acceptance. Recovery changed her relationship with the world. Fame no longer defined worth. Work no longer justified sacrifice. She slowed down deliberately, choosing projects with meaning rather than momentum. She spoke openly about eating disorders, emotional pressure, and the cost of childhood stardom, not to accuse, but to illuminate. Her later years became an act of reclamation, not of fame, but of self. Reunions with Disney were no longer performances, they were acknowledgments of history. Her legacy was no longer the girl she had been forced to represent, but the woman who survived becoming her. Today, Hayley Mills exists outside the narrow frame Hollywood once built around her. She remains connected to art, to family, to memory, but no longer imprisoned by expectation. When audiences revisit her films now, they see something deeper, not just innocence, but endurance, not just optimism, but courage. Her story is not one of tragedy nor of triumph alone. It is the story of a life lived under magnification, shaped by forces larger than itself, yet slowly reclaimed through honesty and time. Hayley Mills was never just Disney's girl next door. She was a child navigating adult worlds, a woman rebuilding after loss, and an artist who refused to disappear simply because the spotlight moved on. And perhaps that is her greatest legacy. Not that she once symbolized innocence, but that she survived losing it and still chose kindness. Not that she was famous early, but that she learned how to live after fame changed shape. When her films play today, they do more than entertain. They remind us that behind every perfect image is a real person, learning, hurting, growing, and enduring long after the screen fades to black.
If you grew up watching Hayley Mills, you didn't just grow up with a character. You grew up alongside a human being whose story continued long after the credits rolled. And that story, complex and unfinished, deserves to be remembered in full.